In this video, we'll be preparing escabeche de chiles. You can also sometimes hear it just called escabeche de jalapeños because that's usually the one chili that's used the most in making this particular condiment. It's sort of it's my go-to condiment really that I always have in the fridge, and usually, from batches that I've made myself. And normally I'm lucky enough, I have about 12 different chili plants out, mostly jalapeños and serranos, in my yard. But because we're right smack in the middle of the hottest summer on, in the last 20 years or so in the Phoenix area in Arizona, and it's been incredibly dry, my plants are just now, they're growing, they're alive, but they're not producing. It's too hot for them to set plants. So unfortunately, we'll have to use store-bought chilies, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about the huge difference in flavor and in appearance between homegrown and store-bought. But we're gonna start making the recipe. So I'm gonna start heating up my pan over here because I'm gonna toast the spices just a little bit. I don't believe this was in your recipe, but it's something that whenever I do actually remember to, it makes a little bit of a difference. We're gonna toast the cracked peppercorn and we're gonna toast the coriander before we add our liquids in there, okay? But in the meantime, while I'm waiting for this to heat up, we're gonna start talking about the chilies and cutting the chilies first. So I have a mixture here, and this guy was gigantic, of jalapeños right here and serranos. So big difference in appearance right there. Serranos, a little bit more slender, much more slender, more pointed. Jalapeños, more rounded at the bottom and definitely thicker. Okay, color-wise, they're about the same. The jalapeno are maybe just a little bit shinier, naturally more shiny in appearance. But otherwise, so unfortunately, like I said, these are from the store, not from my house. From my house, my jalapeno peppers are usually about this big. This big, nice, fat little chilies, kind of spicy, nice and spicy. The serranos are about this size, again, about half the length. So unfortunately, the ones that are commercially available are always not as spicy, not as flavorful, a lot bigger, and essentially they're a little waterlogged, which is why they're so big. The plants are just overwatered to get them to produce more, and doesn't necessarily always give you the best flavor. But lesson opportunity right here. So if you have the ability, definitely grow your own chilies. They're super easy to grow. In Arizona, we're lucky where, I've had my plants now, they're in their third year. It's just in the summertime they kind of go on break. But, try to grow your own. It's definitely worth it. So I'm gonna start cutting these. I'm gonna cut the top of these. And the ones that I grow at home, they're usually small enough where I'll actually even leave the top. And I just leave them whole, and I just cut, a little X on the bottom, just or even just with a paring knife, I'll just cut into it just to create a vent pocket, so that otherwise when you're pickling them in the cooking process, if it doesn't have like a way for the pressure to even out between inside the chili and outside the chili, they'll kind of collapse and become all wrinkly, and they'll be full of liquid. Otherwise, just cut a vent hole, or I cut them in half lengthwise and then into quarters. These guys are still a little bit on the thick side, so I'm gonna cut them diagonally like so. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut those. Those are my scrap bowls, not the ones for the chilies. So on the serrano, because it is thinner, I'm cutting off the top, and again, cut them in half lengthwise. See, I'm doing an overhand grip right here on my chili. So 2 halves, and now I'm gonna go ahead and cut them in half. So I'm gonna continue doing this for a little bit. I'm gonna check my pot. My pot is getting nice and hot. I just want it to be warm enough that I can lightly toast the spices, add my liquid, and get that liquid going. So in the liquid, I do equal parts distilled white vinegar and water. You want to make sure you use filter water. filtered water or bottled water, not tap water, okay? Because tap water has things in it that are not just water, okay? So it can make your pickles go bad quickly sometimes. So I'm taking my half teaspoon of peppercorn that I'm gonna need, and I'm just gonna give them a slight crush. I'm not trying to pulverize them, I'm just cracking them open a little bit. If you don't get every single one, that's fine, just a slight crack. Now go ahead, toss that in here, and I'm going to also get my Mexican oregano and my coriander seed. Coriander seed, it's about half a teaspoon, okay? Get that going. Just gonna give them in the pan. It's totally dry, no fat in the pan. I'm just toasting these until fragrant, okay? And if you're wondering, is there a big difference between Mexican oregano and Italian oregano or Greek oregano? I don't have Mexican, can I use either one of the other two? I would say you could substitute Mexican for Greek for Mexican, not Italian though. Mexican oregano and Greek oregano, I believe as well, are in the mint family, whereas Italian oregano is not. So Mexican oregano is not actually oregano at all, it's mint. But it's a lot more delicate, a lot more floral in flavor. And if you look closely, there's usually lots of the little flowers with the leaves. So it's not as super pungent as Italian oregano is. So I would definitely say buying the Mexican oregano, it's worth it. You can very easily overpower the flavor if you do Italian. If you're doing Italian and it's a rum flavor profile, just do a small amount. So I'm gonna add water and distilled vinegar, just distilled white vinegar. I usually buy the really big bottle because I use it for cleaning, for everything. So I buy a good big bottle of the good quality and use it for everything. And I'm gonna add also a couple of bay leaves. In my CSA bag over the summer, I happened to get a couple of just little bundles of bay leaves. And you know, just best thing ever to have fresh bay leaves that you dry yourself. So I'm gonna let those start going for a little bit. So it's 2 cups of filtered water, 2 cups of distilled white vinegar. We did, I like to do more oregano probably than a lot of people. So I did almost like a whole tablespoon. I believe in the recipe it says 1 teaspoon. So you can definitely up that and it's fine. Half a teaspoon of cracked black peppercorn and half a teaspoon of coriander seed. Those are going to get going for a little bit. Once this is hot, we're going to add our salt. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to cut the jalapeños and then we'll move on from there. I have here my jalapeños and my serranos that are cut. And of course for this, and for any time that I'm pickling chilies, like either one of these, I'm keeping the seeds. I would not think of taking out the seeds because it's supposed to be spicy. And the great thing about escabeche, when you are mixing it up with onions, with carrots, and we're going to be using chayote to mix it in there, is the heat from the chilies actually transfers to the other vegetables. If you ever do it with adding in cauliflower absorbs all the spice. And so the chili itself, you can eat it, will not be spicy. The cauliflower will be super spicy. So before I start cutting my chayote, I'm gonna add some garlic cloves to my pickling liquid. They're peeled garlic cloves. I'm just gonna go ahead, give it a smash, just gentle press to flatten it a bit and activate the flavor. I'm gonna get these in with the liquid. The liquid's starting to simmer, and I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 tablespoons. You can use either kosher salt or like a coarse sea salt. I'm gonna go ahead, add 2 tablespoons. This one is from Mexico. on the sea salt. I'm gonna let this continue to simmer. It just started simmering here. I'm gonna let it continue for about 5 minutes. That's going to help cook out some of the sharpness of that distilled vinegar, which is also why I cut it with a little bit of water to just dilute the flavor just a little, or dilute the sharpness just a little bit. So I'm gonna take my chayote right here. Chayote, nice, it looks almost like a pear. My child asked if this was a pear, but it's a squash, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, cut it in half, overhand grip right here. Cut it in half, and you notice that it has this kind of nut in the seed, and that is actually pretty good. So we're gonna leave it in there, okay? It's not something that has to come out. And I'm gonna cut just chunks, okay? Kind of different geometric chunks right here. And I'll show you guys right here. So the way that this is cooked, and of course you can do this in your recipe. There are instructions for both how you can do it as a canning process, where you basically just gently simmer things really quickly, put them in the can, in the jar for canning, put your hot liquid in them, and then hot process them. Or you can do the stovetop method here, which is honestly what I've been doing lately, because in 110-degree weather, I'm not running my canning pot just at all. So, just got a mouthful of vinegar while I was talking. Okay, so I'm gonna continue cutting the chayote. So when you are doing the stovetop process, as I am doing here, you want to make sure you add things that will cook in about that same period of time together. My onions, I'm using the chiles, the chayote. I really hate, well, I don't like to use the word hate, but I really dislike the sound of chayote squash. Just call it chayote, and then if somebody asks, well, what is chayote? I don't know what it is. So say, oh, it's this really wonderful squash that looks like a pear, but it's not, it's a squash. Then, you know, conversation point right there. Back to what I was saying. The serranos, the jalapeños, the chayote, and the carrots are all going to go in together. The onions will go in at the end because they only need about a minute, and then you're going to let everything rest in the liquid anyway. So I'm going to finish cutting my chayote here. Now I'm adding 2. Okay, you can do less, that's fine. You can do more. You can choose to do all carrots. You might not want chayote, you might not want onions. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, peel my carrots. That is, by the way, the most efficient way to peel a carrot. I know this because I've peeled many carrots. And I tell everyone to get these little peelers because they're fantastic and they're like $4 or something like that. They have a carbon steel blade that stays sharp forever. Just don't put them through the dishwasher. I'm gonna cut my carrot here on a little bit of an angle, so a slight bias. And I'm gonna cut them about 1/4 inch thick, maybe just a little bit thinner. Okay, so nice long bias. Okay, show you that cut. Nice cut, okay? And that little angle doesn't do anything as far as the cooking process. It just makes it look nicer, okay? And you know, it's you're going to eat with your eyes first, then your nose, and then finally your taste buds. And I've known a lot of people that will flat out say they have the worst taste buds, you know, so try to make whatever you're making look nice, okay? And it's gonna make a difference. So cutting it on the bias and keeping the carrot peels and those scraps for chicken food. They'll love it. Maybe I'll be nice and I'll save them a piece of chayote. They'll love that too. Okay. So last thing we're going to do, and I feel like my pickling liquid is almost ready. So I'm gonna have to move the camera so you guys can see. But last thing I'm gonna do is peel that onion, and this is not gonna go into the chicken food because it's not great for them to eat onions. Doesn't do anything bad for them, and I don't have my chickens aren't laying yet, but they will soon, hopefully. So I cut the top and the bottom of the onion, made a score on the outer layer of the onion to be able to peel that easier. And if you can't find onions right now because of the recalls, well, you know, that's fine. Just don't do onions. But a lot of the stores have them. So I'm gonna cut them in half. Again, overhand grip, cut in half. And then I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch strip all the way around. And you notice how I'm sort of now changing my hand over here, right? Rotating my hand. But then when we get to that last bit of the onion, I just lay the onion down. Okay, makes it easier to keep cutting. So about 1/4 inch strips. I turn my heat back up since I took the lid off. Okay. So we have our vegetables cut, and now we're gonna change angle so you guys can see what's going on in the pot. And we're gonna finish off our escabeche. So we have our pickling liquid right here. Okay, it's that mixture of the distilled vinegar, the water, coriander seed, the Mexican oregano, black peppercorn, salt. I did a coarse sea salt. I'll show you what that salt looks like right here. Coarse sea salt, 2 bay leaves, and some garlic cloves. Okay, the garlic cloves, I am going to actually go ahead and remove because we don't actually need them to be in our pickle towards the end. Garlic cloves can go bad fairly quickly if the balance of acid and salt is not right. They'll end up turning green. So I'd rather get them out of the way. So we're going to pull those out. I'm going to go ahead and add in my carrots, chayote, and my jalapeños. And we struck that right balance between the amount of pickling liquid that we need and our vegetables. So I'm going to go ahead, put a lid on this, and let it simmer for, I'm going to turn the heat up, and I'm going to let it simmer for about 4 minutes. So we are almost at those 6 minutes, okay? And you'll notice how the jalapeños and the serranos have started to change color. That one still needs to cook a little bit longer. And so you don't want to cook these for too long. If you cook them for too long, they're going to be too mushy and just not pleasing in texture. So it's really finding a balance of the least amount of cooking that you need to do. That 6-minute mark for the carrots, for chayote, and for the jalapeños is going to be pretty good. If you're using something softer like a summer squash or cauliflower, zucchini, the Mexican squash, gray Mexican squash, it will take a little bit less time. As I just had to take a little coughing break there, you will notice that this is a recipe you want to do when you make sure that there's no small children, people with asthma, or small dogs, etc. around. You want to make sure you have good ventilation because between the vinegar and the spiciness of the chilies, it's going to open up your sinuses quite a bit. All right, so the color of my chilies has changed to where I want it. It's been 6 minutes now. I'm going to go ahead and add the onions, okay, and mix them in. I'm going to put the lid on this, and after a minute, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat. I'll move it from the burner so that it doesn't continue to cook too much, but I'm going to let the rest of the cooking finish with carryover heat. Okay, so after a minute, turning it off, moving it from the heat, and we'll let it finish right there. So from the scent of things, it looks like there was quite a bit of spice in those chilies, which makes me really happy since this is, of course, supposed to be spicy. So I'm going to go ahead and now take this out of the pot, and put it into some jars. It doesn't mean I'm gonna hot process them. I store it in jars because it will infuse, if you put it in something plastic, it will infuse it with spiciness for life. So glass, a lot better. I let things rest in here for about 10 minutes after I turned off the heat. So everything finishes cooking. I'm gonna fill this up and tamp it down. Put some more of those chilies and put some more of the chilies, and you want to make sure that there is enough liquid to cover everything. Okay, so just go ahead. They do make wonderful gifts. I end up giving these away all the time. And of course, still coughing and sneezing a little bit from the heat of this and the vinegar sharpness. You want to make sure you separate out that onion, otherwise it will get stuck together. So each little strip of onion gets separated and it might not cook properly. And just try out different things that you might want to throw in there to pickle. I've done daikon, so Japanese radish. That pickles wonderfully. I don't really suggest to pickle regular radish unless you do only radish, because it makes it into almost like a sauerkraut, which in this mix doesn't really taste great on its own. It's pretty good. And it turns a delightful shade of pink. But try different vegetables. I've done celery in here. Celery pickles wonderfully. So just try out what you think or what you like, and find what's your favorite. But otherwise, this is escabeche. I'm gonna keep this in the fridge. Once it's cool, I'm gonna let it cool completely, and then put it in the fridge. And a couple of these guys are gonna find other homes, since I already have a lot from the chilies in my garden in my fridge. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or comments, reach out to me at minerva.ordunl@gmail. Make the title something food related so that I will actually see it, and or go to cucumbersandlimes.com all together. Thanks.